Sorry. Um, Welcome again, everybody, for those of you guys who just heard me. I'm Clark Hung, Professor of Biomedical Engineering. Welcome to our workshop on graduate school opportunities. This is something that the department's been thinking about doing for a while. I think one of the things we aim for is actually to try to create a pipeline for diversity and underrepresented students toward graduate school, as well as provide a service for our own students in general in terms of trying to understand different routes for graduate school, differences between master's and PhD, and even master's to PhD programs as well. So this is the first time we're doing this. We're lucky to have a couple great faculty here today, as well as a student panel to answer some questions. Jose McPhillim Figueroa will talk a little bit about the whys going to graduate school, the differences between master's and PhD, different funding mechanisms in terms of scholarships, as well as in the way the PhD programs might fund directly. And then Elisa Kanapagu, who's a professor of biomedical engineering as well. She'll discuss, the importance of doing research as a stepping stone to getting into graduate school, and then the nuts and bolts of the actual application process to basically apply and get a competitive application, and then trying to choose the right program for you as well. And then we're hoping to spend half the time tonight with an alumni student panel, a bunch of folks who graduated from our program who are now in different places in terms of an industry, or as well as in graduate education, as well as an individual who's in the bridge program who's sort of been transitioning from bachelor's to graduate school. And this gives you guys sort of a wide view in terms of the different opportunities that are out there. And again, please feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. If there's any issues with AV, also point that through as well. We have Professor Lanscam monitoring the chat here, so let us know whether there's any issues as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Jose, and he can basically start this program for you guys. Thanks. Guess you can all put
anyway. Welcome everyone. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit, as Clark mentions, on the start by what are the benefits of pursuing graduate education. One that is quite clear right off the bat: you can gain specialization or more training, and improve your research, writing, and analysis skills. But at the end of the day too, it also makes you more competitive in the workplace and better positioned for professional advancement. And in addition, depending on the type of program that you choose, it can also provide a transition for professional degree applications. So you can become more competitive if you want to go after a different type of program later. And I think also at the very basic, and this is true for many of us here, it's the intellectual challenge and curiosity of learning something new, right? So I guess from the 30, this is a huge very simplistic view of the goals of different graduate degrees. So we can think about it, very loosely, as master's being career in industry, doctorate or MS PhD. In this case, this is the end goal is a PhD as a career in research. And there's also more specialized career options like MD PhD. We won't talk a lot about MD PhD today, just to highlight some of the ways that it's similar to PhD, but that's geared more towards a career in medical research. But I'll say, and this is kind of the big disclaimer that I'll add here, is that these are not in any way, shape, or form hard boundaries, that there's a lot of overlap across these. So it's definitely true that many with a PhD work in industry, work in marketing, people with masters doing research, and so forth. So I guess I do want to dive in a little bit in terms of the specific benefits for the first two, so master's and PhD programs. So for that master's program, first of all, the master's degrees have that reputation of essentially meeting that market and workforce demand. So, that's where that idea sometimes of industry comes from. And it really opens multiple educational and career pathways for students. So that's something that we want to highlight as well a lot, that it can open the doors to other educational opportunities. It's not just your terminal degree. And during your master's, you're able to take upper level classes and even perform graduate level research. So for example, we have a strong research-based master's program. So in terms of the benefits of pursuing the PhD degree, it's a little bit different in the sense that it's incredibly specialized. So you're becoming specialized in one kind of small sliver of STEM research. You become an expert in the field for something in particular. But I think broadly, it does prepare you to approach problems when they aren't clearly defined. So, this is maybe a little bit different in with respect to what you've done as an undergraduate, where, you're in a lot of classes, you're learning something that's much more defined and there's an answer. Whereas here, many of us are working on things where we're working on it because we don't know what the end is. And at the end of the day, all of those skills are transferable, and you'll get things like strong communication, leadership, and problem solving skills. Now, I think a little bit more to the nitty gritty. And this is, one question that I think comes up a lot. What is the time commitment? What does this actually look like when you're doing it? So here we have for the 3 programs, the time to degree, and whether it is something that you can do part or full time. Especially if you're working at the same time in something else. So the master's tends to be 1 to 2 years to degree. You can do both part-time or full-time. We have, for example, a program that's part-time for master's. The PhD degrees are longer, 4 to 6 years overall. Usually it's a full-time position. Same with MD PhD. MD PhD is quite a bit longer, 7 to 8, because you have to fulfill both requirements for your MD and your PhD. And really, that part-time or full-time also goes with the fact that when you're thinking about funding, so things like, who covers the cost at each one of these different types of degrees. For the master's, it's usually funded by the student. Now, I'll talk a little bit about, some opportunities and exceptions to that rule. And then for the PhD programs, they're usually covered by school, department, laboratory, usually a combination of these across the time that you're doing your PhD. So if we start there with that master's, and we're thinking about costs, yes, it is usually funded by the students, but I really want to highlight that there are opportunities for financial aid available. There's also certain fellowships that you can apply to that can help cover funding. So here we have 3 examples. The Fulbright Scholarships Program, which is a program that funds if you're a US citizen, for example, it'll fund studies in international studies, so outside of the US. I believe as well, there's the opposite. If you're an international student, they can fund your studies in the United States. And there are a couple of others that are a bit more specialized. GEM, the National GEM Consortium, which tends to fund summer research. The NSF GRFP, which we'll be talking a little bit more in a little bit later today. But that one can fund research-based masters. It can also fund your PhD. So with that, I think, on the flip side, your PhD, what does that funding look like? It is covered by your school, department, lab. And the way that it usually looks like is that tuition in STEM PhD programs. So I do want to make the caveat that I'm talking about STEM. This is not necessarily the case in other PhDs. The tuition is funded, and students will generally receive a salary stipend. Now, I'll also say that students can also apply to things to be able to cover their own funding. And you might ask, well, why would I actually do this if someone's already on the hook for paying for these? Why would you apply to get that funding? And that's kind of a good segue to predoctoral fellowships. So here I'm showing you a pretty, all of these cartoons are a small example of the kinds of fellowships that exist. So some are from government agencies, such as the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, or the Defense. There are some private foundation ones as well. And when you apply to these and receive them, you're demonstrating that you have the ability to obtain funding. So you can imagine that definitely, for academia, we're all writing grants to be able to have funding for our labs. But you can also imagine that this is a skill. Writing, a grant that will get funded is something that you can also use in industry and other settings, right? And I'll note that some of these fellowships are geared at increasing underrepresented minority participation in STEM. So for example, that top one on the left, the Ruth L. Kirkseen NRSA, National Research Service Awards, has more than one kind of type. There's a diversity one that's specifically geared at increasing participation of underrepresented minorities in science. I'm actually a recipient of that. And one other example is the NSF GRFP. which we talked about. We'll go even more in detail into that one because it's kind of an important one, but you can apply to it prior to acceptance to your graduate program. So as an undergraduate, you can apply. And I think, an area that I wanted to briefly cover is kind of this question that, how do I know if I'm competitive for a PhD program? What if I feel that I'm not there yet? What if you want more research experience? So one option are these post-baccalaureate programs or Postbac programs. Now, here, they're usually 1 to 2 years in length. They're a salaried position. That asterisk is, again, because we're talking about STEM research-based postbacs. There are postbacs that are for MD, for medical school, that you tend to pay for. The aim of these is to make students more competitive for admission to PhD programs. They can give you research experience. They give you the opportunity to take graduate level courses. So then you can show that you can do well in these types of courses. And many of them are also geared at increasing the number of underrepresented minority students in the STEM PhD programs. Now, these are not located everywhere, but they are pretty widely located. So this is a map here on the right of the NIH prep programs, the post-baccalaureate research education programs across the US. So it's, there's a decent amount of places there. In terms of the common types, so the NIH programs are some of the most common, and the National Science Foundations has multiple as well that are usually labeled something bridge to PhD, bridge to doctorate. Here at Columbia, we have one of these programs. It's the Columbia Bridge to PhD, which is an NSF-funded program. And there are a couple of more in the city as well. And I'll note that, postbacs are not necessarily the only option. So this is something that I'm kind of did not add to these slides, but for example, you can look for research assistant or technician positions that are, of course, you're going to get your research experience, and many of these as well allow you the opportunity to take 1 or 2 courses at the university in which you're working. So that's something that I did as well when I was a research technician at MIT. So I guess I want to end by talking a little bit about our graduate programs in BME. So we have the master's only program, which has no specific tracks, and it's designed for flexibility. So going back to those market demands. And for our doctoral program, we have 2 tracks, you could say. There's a MS to PhD, which is for those that come in without a master's degree, PhD only. Admission is, I guess I shouldn't have said track in terms of MS PhD. There are some specific tracks in terms of the specialization that you do during your PhD, and then you're matching to a particular lab. And then here, you have the opportunity to interdisciplinary research. Although again, as a master's student, you can also look to do research in one of our labs. And the question is, well, we got this degree, what happens after? So where are master's graduates now? They're in a really wide variety of different industries, medical devices, engineering, consulting, biotech. Many have gone on to do doctoral studies in BME or related fields, and many are doing other types of programs like medical, dental, or other health professionals. And this is across a pretty wide swath of different companies, both in terms of internships and working full-time. And with regards to our PhD graduates, of course, many do stay in academia to become professors, lecturers, and have research positions across different universities. But they also, they work in the medical device industry, consulting, marketing, biotech, and also have, roles that you typically think of as industry roles, like being CSOs, CEOs, directors in different industry or consulting institutions. And it's really just a really wide swath of different careers that you can go through your PhD. So this is just a word cloud of, for a certain set of our PhD graduates, their titles currently. So hopefully that was kind of helpful in terms of giving you the lay of the land of what these programs look like. And I think now I'll hand it over to Professor Elisa Conefago.
Thank you. Thanks, Jose. Thank you, Clark. Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa Conefago, and I'll talk more about how research can be fun, which is breaking news for some people, but we all have the research bug and we want to pass it along to you guys. And if you do get it, then there's a lot of different avenues that open up for you. And it doesn't mean research doesn't mean unpaid. And I think Jose made that very nicely, that point. And actually a research technician became a PhD student in my lab. So you can start from somewhere that's being paid. And we all started from somewhere. We didn't just, helicoptering its professors. So there's a lot of different programs. The Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship, SURE is more of a more recent thing with Amazon funded. More undergraduate research by NIST, and National Science Foundation is there. So what it allows you to do is basically get started. If you've never been in a research lab before, it can be a little bit disorienting, but people have done it before, and you spend your summers. Again, it can be under a fellowship, and you get hands-on experience, and you find basically where your niche is. And I was previously a graduate chair for 7 years, and Helen, who sits back there, she knows everything. So ask her the tough questions. But basically it starts with your senior year. So I don't know how many people are already in the senior year, but you take the GRE, in a couple of months from now, and then you, and then I think then you retake it if you have to. And then you identify your letter writer. So that's when it becomes really important to have done some research, and people can see your skills, your talent, because you all have it. You just have to show it. And then you don't get a generic letter. You get actually a letter that suits you. Then you contact the professors, and I've been contacted, and I have to say I'm pretty lazy. So if you contact me, then I'm maybe getting you in my lab. If you don't contact me, you're just going to be in that pile. So please don't be too shy. Yes, your email may be ignored. It's okay. We're all busy. Just remind us, and we'll get you there eventually. Then you have to submit your applications around November, December. So it gets a little bit stressful towards the end of the year. Your letter writers may not be really, up to the task. You have to remind them. That's okay. We all get reminders, 1 million reminders around that time. And then you start hearing about interviews. So I think you have to diversify. Maybe your dream school is not happening, and it's okay. We've all been there. So, get at least a few schools going. And then around February, March, we actually have it mid-February here. The interviews are happening. And then by April 15th, for our program, that's next Friday, you have to commit and sign on the dotted line. So you have to make your decision. So at the same time, there's a lot of fellowships. You can, as Jose mentioned, you can start doing, if you're in a master's program, you can get an NSF fellowship. Again, that you can start writing your NSF fellowship. Actually, a couple of my students came in with an NSF fellowship. So they wrote it during the senior year. And, so by the time they came into my lab, they were already funded. So that was nice. I didn't know that when I interviewed them, because the NSF fellowship outcomes come in April. So before you commit to a program, but so anyway, so you can do this in parallel, gives you more chances to basically, say to somebody, I'm already funded. So would you take me to the lab and your lab? And sometimes it happens because you're funded already. Now, how do you find the right program? Obviously, again, you have to do your homework. You have to research the graduate programs. It's never too early. Obviously, there's a lot of online guides. You speak to advisors, speak to your friends, see where, go online, Google the lab. I mean, if they don't have a website, that's a bad sign. Attend the seminars, especially now, seminars are virtual, they're free. You can catch, on YouTube, a few of the seminars that are playing nonstop. And then again, I mean, just do your research, see what triggers, because that's going to be a commitment during a PhD or even a master's. Something that really triggers a curiosity, that you can see yourself doing this for a couple of years for your master's or 5 years for your PhD. So finding the right lab, you have to contact the professors again, not being so shy, and please don't be that shy, especially in this day and age. So see if they're taking students. If they're not taking students, you go to your next, first choice. Email the faculty again. Be kind. I've been basically called the sir a few times, dear sir. You can find that I'm not, I'm not the, so, do your homework and address them at the right tone. Don't do it like a generic copy paste, which is much faster, because then, you give the wrong impression. So spend a couple of minutes to, structure it, and be persistent. It's okay. The worst they can do, they can block you. You're not going to know. It's like Facebook, I think. All right. Elements of the application. So that you have to be careful and you have to take your time. Your transcripts have to be there in time. The GRE score is being waived. I know that in our program, we don't look at it very much. I mean, some people do, but others don't. So your CV has to basically be there, nicely structured. So do a few edits on your CV, or have a professional look at it. Personal statement, extremely important. This is what differentiates you from everybody else. Everybody else has transcripts, a CV, and a GRE score. So what makes you special, again, is your research. What has happened over the few years in your undergrad or your master's? What have you done? And then that's going to be nicely reflected also in your reference letters. Right? These two have to be very nicely in tandem. This person really likes research and they're good at that. It doesn't matter whether you're good in data engineering and you want to do machine learning, but at least you have the knack for research. That has to come across in something. So very important to get the right letter writers and relevant research and all these future plans. Okay, so we covered it. Visiting the school, so that happens usually when you interview, again around February, March, and take our school, actually, our department funds you. You come here, you basically have your interview, but you also interact with the current graduate students, and that's very important. Sometimes you find out that this is not the lab that you want to work in. I mean, you look at the other graduate students and you're like, I don't want to work with this person, and that's okay. So keep your eyes out. Maybe you want to go to another lab or another overall school. And then the PI, so us, we also gauging you at the same time, very, very the same way. Are you going to be a good fit? It's not just your knowledge or whether you have a GPA of 4.0. It's basically the overall package. And then again, take as much advantage of your personal visits. So especially now that we're back to having in-person visits. So how do you make a decision? Again, we said around this time, you have to commit to your program. So your regular pros and cons list, you may want to revisit, talk again to the graduate students, postdocs, PI, make sure that you have made the right decision, because especially for a PhD and even for a master's, it's a very important decision. Yeah, and then you look at your finances as well, because there's some aspects like that as well that come into play, obviously. I'm going to pass it on to.
Great. No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Elisa. So no, it's a great presentation by Jose and Elisa. And I guess I just wanted to say that in terms of the master's and the PhD programs, I think Jose laid it out really clearly. And the one major distinction is typically the funding. Funding typically comes along with the PhD. The master's is usually self-funded, and then other avenues. Also related to what Elisa just finished, I think that interviews for the PhD program are pretty much mandatory. And I think for the master's, some programs that may require them, others may not. And again, it depends on the situation. But I think in many cases, individuals looking at master's programs are also looking at research labs as well. And in my own personal case, there's been situations where students came in as master's students and it ended up transitioning into the doctoral program because they were already working in my lab and I had firsthand experience with them. And essentially they were able to just kind of join the program that way. So again, there's a lot more flexibility between the lines here, but I think these guys really laid it out very nicely in terms of what the normal process is. So anyway, it's my opportunity now to sort of transition over to the alumni student panel. We're lucky to have a couple of our former graduates, Kelsey, Alexander, and Ketsia are former students of our undergraduate program who are out and about doing great things today. So I'll let them speak about where they are today as well. And we also have Amara, who's basically in the bridge program, which something Jose had mentioned, which is sort of the transition going to the graduate level from the bachelor's degree. So why don't I basically have I'll go down in the order of the panel right now. What I can do is I'm going to get out of this and basically let you guys see a bigger picture of the panelists. And okay, so I think what we can do is maybe we'll go my screen anyway. Kelsey is actually on the left top, so maybe I'll have Kelsey go first, and then we can just introduce you guys briefly. Just talk about how you got to where you are today, since I think hearing from you guys will be the best thing for the students. Thanks.
Hi, you guys can hear me?
Oh, hang on for a second.
Hmm?
That's weird. Stop what? Oh, what I thought? What am I sharing now? Share the main desktop. Okay. Okay. Hang on. This one. All right, hang on a second. That's weird.
Is it extended? Can you drag it a little bit? No.
I don't want to lose it. Sorry about this, guys. So online though, can you guys see the gallery? Maybe it's something here.
Yeah, we can see the gallery online.
Okay, so it's just in here. So it's a little confusing. All right.
Can you find that again?
So here,
Oh, yeah, you can share.
share now. Share the main.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, drag it. You're on one.
Okay, I'm not. Okay,
Hold on.
here you do it. Where's 2?
2 is over there. But Evan's.
Okay.
Expanded. What? Yeah, we're sharing this screen. Yeah, we are. Is that okay? We shouldn't?
What do you see, Lance?
Maybe we should stop sharing here
Or
and then just drag that.
There you go.
okay, there you go.
And then how do I? Okay, that's okay. Can it be bigger or not?
How do we get them more over? Sorry, this room has a very odd AV system, so it takes. We were laughing about this. How many biomedical engineers does it
Yeah,
take to get
exactly.
the
How is
video
that?
to
Is
work?
that okay?
That's right, very collaborative team here. And so what it is now I can't really see it on the screen, but I hopefully you guys can hear us. And
Yep,
and I guess
all is good.
Katya, why don't you once you start off and we'll go around. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. You guys can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm Kelsey, she, her pronouns. I'm a first year PhD student at UT Austin. So I graduated in the spring, last spring. And then just how I got into my PhD. Is that it?
Sure. Your path, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I guess I went into undergrad not really sure what I wanted to do. I thought research, but I didn't really know what that meant. So sophomore year, I applied for an REU program, which you guys heard about, and I did that at NYU. And I just really liked being able to ask questions and kind of look for answers. And the idea of building upon previous knowledge and being able to generate new information was really cool to me. So then I got involved in undergrad research my junior year. And then just kind of talking to professors, other BME professors about what my options were post-graduation. They're like, well, if you really like research and you really like teaching, that kind of sounds like our job. So I thought, maybe I should look at going into academia. So that's kind of my plan right now. And from there, it was just researching schools and trying to find departments where I could work with somebody that was doing research in a broad field that I wanted to do. Yeah, and then I applied, interviewed at different schools, and chose a school that had a good vibe for me and advisors that I thought would be supportive of my professional endeavors, which for me would be academia, but some people might want to go into industry, and so their advisors might have different approaches. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am today.
Great. Thanks, Katya. So how about Amara? Why don't you go next? This works.
Hi, sure. Hi everyone. I'm Amara. I'm in the Bridge to PhD program, and similar to Ketsia, I was involved in research in undergrad, and I just really liked being part of the science and asking questions. And when it came time to graduate, I just kind of wanted to stay in that area. And so, yeah, I talked to professors, and they said academia would be a good route. But I think what's unique about this program is it's more research intensive than a master's program because it focuses more on the research and then has some classes on the side. And it's fully funded, so you get a stipend. So it's a great option if you're considering going to get your PhD, but want to make sure that you know, are studying the right things for you that you're very interested in, or being a more competitive applicant by getting more involved in research. So yeah, I think that's what I was supposed to answer.
Great, thank you. Alex, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I graduated from Columbia in 2018. While I was an undergrad there, I was also a researcher and I did a lot of wet lab stuff. I thought I wanted to do a PhD at one point, or at least work kind of like in the pharmaceutical research space. But towards the end of my undergrad time, I decided I wanted to go into industry, particularly for like kind of like design, like device design, all that kind of stuff. And so when I graduated, I applied to a bunch of jobs like that, not getting any interviews. So I took a gap year. Well, it was kind of forced on me, right? I took a gap year and I worked as a research technician at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City on the Upper East Side. And so while I was there, I decided I wanted to go back to school so I could prepare myself for industry. Decided to go for a master's degree. Knocked that out in a year and a half. After that, I went into consulting for human factors engineering for a year. And now I'm at Genentech as a full-time human factors engineer.
Great, thanks, Alex. And Kelsey.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kelsey. I graduated in 2020 from Columbia. And basically, my story is I came to Columbia determined to be a part of Dr. Danino's lab. And Dr. Hung actually fought for me to get into that lab after lots and lots of trial and error. So
I didn't have to fight too hard, Kelsey.
And what ended up happening was I ended up spending a lot of time in that lab. I developed a close relationship with Tetsu, who was the PhD student that I worked under. And my original plan was to do an MSMBA. I wanted to get involved in biotech with startups and VC and whatnot. And basically, I trusted Tetsu so much, and his advice, he told me, don't do that. Him and Dr. Nino actually exhorted that I pursue PhD, and I did have to talk to Dr. Kyle about it and other people that I trusted about it. I took their advice and I went ahead and applied to schools and opened up a bunch of opportunities for me that I never knew existed. That's how I ended up pursuing a PhD. I landed at my school because what's the difference? Should I get into that, or is that a different segment that we'll touch upon?
It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I ended up at my school, UMBC, because after being on Twitter and asking around, there are some schools that are known for being very supportive and have programs that really support grad students who look like me. And UMBC is one of them with their My Hall program. I went to visit. I fell in love with the program, the people there, the culture, I love the location. The stipend was excellent, and the cost of living was much cheaper than in New York City. So yeah, that's that's pretty much my story, how I ended up where I'm at.
That's great. And actually, I see Professor Kyle. Aaron, you want to just show yourself and say hello for a second? Hopefully, I'm not catching him at a bad time. All right, maybe. Okay, there we go.
No,
Aaron.
it's not a bad time at all. I stuffed myself with a vegetarian po' boy, so it's hard to move. Hey, everybody. Kelsey, Alex, so good to see you folks. I'm glad you're doing well. I think a lot of the undergraduates there that already know me. I'm Aaron. I was fortunate enough to be able to be involved in this workshop, and hopefully we get some really good information to help you think about what's the right direction for you, right? I mean, you see us as your faculty, and you might assume that like Professor Kodafaku said, you kind of helicopter into these things, but it really is a path. And having people like Ketsia and Alex and Amara and Kelsey here to talk through it will hopefully help you folks to achieve some clarity as you're trying to make these decisions for yourself.
That's right. Okay, so what we can do is we can open up some questions. We have some questions that people have sort of added in during the registration, but I think actually we covered a fair amount of these questions. So I don't know whether anyone here in the audience has questions. Otherwise, there might be some from the chat. Otherwise, we have a kind of captive audience here. Yep. Hi. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello. Thank you guys for speaking with us. I just had a question for the PhD students here on whether, my understanding is that some labs are more PI driven in terms of what projects get started, and some are more student driven. I was kind of curious, what's your lab like, and whether that's a dynamic that you found out in interviews and informed your decision at all.
Kelsey, why don't you go first, and then Kelsey? That way we don't have.
Sure. So I guess in my situation, when like looking at labs and like schools that I was interested in, I went on their websites and like I read through their like most recent publications on like Google Scholar to see like what they were doing. And then in the interviews, that's kind of what I asked them. And so like each of the labs I was thinking about, there was a specific project that I wanted to work on, and I made that known to them in my interviews, and I asked them like, can I work on this? Do you have funding for it? Or like, if I were to join, what would you put me on? What kind of project would I be on? But I know that's not the case for everyone. I think like if you're doing like rotations instead of like direct matching, a lot of times they'll put you on a project, but I haven't known any advisors that would put you on something you don't want to work on. But the best way to find out is to really just ask while you're interviewing.
Kelsey, why don't you go, man?
Yeah, I would echo the same thing with like Kelsey had said. Send emails and ask if they have room for you with your project. Do your research, go on Google whatever you're passionate about, whatever field you want to go into, and see which labs are come up on the Google search, most prominent. For my situation, it was actually interesting. I'm passionate about synthetic biology, and the professor at UMBC that I reached out to, he was actually leaving, and the professor who I work, whose lab I'm in right now, Dr. Mark Martin, him and I developed a really good relationship. He kept calling me and telling me about this new project he wanted to do involving basically engineering fungi to make plastics, and that really excited me. And so that was his project. However, that project never got funded, but I'm able to keep working on it because I have my own funding. So it's kind of a little bit of both. It was originally his idea, and he helped build the infrastructure around it, helped me get the support system that I need to, work in certain mechanical engineering labs and get mentorship and training in SynBio and all his other aspects that he had really had no expertise in or previous experience in. But I'm definitely driving the bus with this project. Like this is, especially since he has no funding for it. So I hope that answers your question.
Questions? Anyone else?
Hi guys, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I want to ask Kelsey specifically. You mentioned someone in your lab advising you not to do the MSMBA path. I was just wondering if you could elaborate, like what exactly did he or she said about that, and what convinced you to not go down that path?
So what Tetsu said was that like, I don't want to deter anyone from getting an MS. So basically what he said was there was more opportunities for PhD, and why not get a PhD? If you can run a lab, you can get academia, you can go in industry, you can be the authority in government. There's just a lot more doors open to you as a PhD. What sold me was that you can travel as a PhD student, which I thought was really cool. I love to travel. Like I was just in California last week recruiting for my school, and I'm going to California again next week for a conference that Ginkgo Bioworks is sponsoring me for. So I thought it was really cool, the opportunity to travel. And as I looked at positions and career trajectories that I really liked, most of those people had PhDs. So in order to get to where I wanted to be, a PhD was like a very necessary prerequisite. And I know that because of these opportunity, I just am learning a lot more I'm being exposed to a lot more opportunities that I don't think I would have been exposed to if I chose my original path of an MSMBA. Especially going to academia, like I've had a complete change of heart about academia, and I'm starting to look into it a lot more and be more open-minded to opportunities down that path. So that's why I chose a PhD.
Might just jump in here. I'm just curious. I guess maybe we can just ask Amara a question. So in terms of the application process for the bridge, is that sound similar to the master's kind of program application, or was it kind of a unique system?
I think it's pretty similar. You have your 3 letters of rec. You write personal statements, cover letter, and you send in your resume. I think the only difference is the GRE, but like Dr. Elisa said earlier, they kind of waived that now because of COVID. So yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Go ahead.
So in the Q&A here, and I guess we'll start with the panelists on here. What helped you figure out your specific research job field interest?
So let's go to Alex. Why don't you answer that first, since you haven't had the opportunity?
Thank you. This is inclusion. I'm sorry.
It is. I have the power, man.
So I decided that I wanted to go into the specific field of human factors because while I was doing my master's, it was very much like design, like heavy on like design and like the technical aspects of medical device engineering. And along the way, we started to talk more about incorporating kind of like patient empathy and kind of patient perspective into all of the design work that you do, and like from conceptualizing like the first prototype all the way down to commercialization, just like making sure that you're thinking about the patient or the end user throughout the entire process. And I really like that aspect of it, and kind of like taking empathy into engineering. And I was kind of like, well, when I was interviewing for design jobs, the design engineers that I was talking to didn't seem like they were as interested in the conversation of empathy and usability and making sure that the products that they're making are as usable as possible for all the possible users of that product. A lot of it is sticking to specs and what was done in the past. And so that's when I learned about human factors and kind of that field, and how the entire field is based on taking patient perspective and incorporating it into medical products, and like making sure that that makes its way into the design stages, makes its way into the packaging design, the labeling design, the design of the carton, like all those different things. And it's all based on our ability to like sit across from patients one-on-one, and we have them use versions of the product. And while they're using it, we have them talk about their experience with it, any past experiences that they've had with similar products, and kind of just like make them the expert in that moment. And we do that with a number of different participants, and we get to synthesize all that information and all those stories and bring it back to our design team and say, like, we have real world evidence saying that we need to make these changes because this is what our users actually want. Like, you can't tell me I'm lying. I have the quote, I have the video, like I have it all. And so I like really, when I finally got the chance to do that over the summer while I was in grad school, I thought that was great. And so from there, I mean, it felt like a no-brainer. And so I'll probably be in human factors or something human factors related for a while, just because I really love the interconnectedness of merging design with like that empathy and patient aspect.
So actually, let me just ask a quick question as a follow-up. So from your master's training, from bachelor's to master's, how much of what you're doing today did you learn on the job versus how much did you brought to the job from your sort of training at school as well? I'm always curious.
From my master's program, a lot actually transferred over, but I think I credit the specific program for that. I went to Duke for my master's, and they have this medical device design certificate program where the professors came from industry, and they're essentially all about teaching empathy, like empathetic design and designing for users and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of what I learned through my education and my master's directly translated, because now I'm in my entire job is now just user-centered engineering. So 1-to-1, I would say. So great bang for your buck, especially because yeah, masters, you got to pay for it a lot of the time.
That's right. Great. Anything else?
Let's see. Well, I mean, we could come back to the same question for some
Okay.
of the panels, but I guess again, thanks, Alex. And I guess I point out that's not a Zoom background he has. That's another consideration. No, for location of where you go. But back to the question: what helped you figure out your specific research field interests? Maybe Ketsia?
Yeah, I think that I kind of had to ignore the things that I considered myself like good at and just look at like what I thought was fun and interesting. So like the classes I enjoyed the most were like my biology classes and my physics classes. Like I really liked physics. And then the REU that I did was in a physics lab. And that was like computational things, and I really enjoyed that. So I really liked being able to code and make models. And I'm sure like if you're a junior or a senior at Columbia, then you've taken like QP. And unusually, I really like the equations that we use to like model body systems. So I knew that whatever it was that I was going to research was going to be physicsy related, and it's going to use equations to model biological systems. And from there, it was just like reading papers and trying things out. And I think if you're some advice, if you're like kind of like deciding between fields or not really sure, so just kind of like look and see what you're excited about. What do you want to know more about? And I think that like my undergrad lab that I tried, because I was like, oh, materials are cool, and I ended up not really being super into that, wasn't wasted time, because that helped me realize that what I really wanted to do was like more fundamental science and biology. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yep. Okay, so we can, any other questions in here? Yep. You got it?
I guess this question is for anyone or whoever wants to answer, but where do you see like 5 years from now, where do you see yourself, or like what do you imagine doing with either, or like with what you're doing now?
So Amara, when did you start?
Sure. Well, my program uniquely is tailored towards the PhD track. So in 5 years, hopefully I'm at the end of my PhD career, or I mean close to defending. But yeah, we'll see.
Kelsey, 5 years from now, where are you going to be?
So coming in, I told my PI that I want to complete my degree in 4 years. So I'm currently in year 2. Ideally, so at least 3 more years after I finish. So that means I also have my fellowship, I have a service commitment. So for every year they support me, that's a year of, so you have to work for the DoD. So I'll be working for them.
Okay, so that makes it easy for you then, I guess.
Yeah, it makes it easy. But I'll be planning my escape route.
Alex, so what you? So you're in industry right now. So in 5 years, what do you think? You're gonna still be there, back at getting an MBA that you didn't get originally, or something? Or
I'm gonna be here. Like this is right. I am I feel like we're very fortunate to be have the opportunity to go into a field such as biomedical engineering. And as you go up more and more in industry, I mean, you just start to see that things like this become much more feasible. So yeah, 5 years, actually, I want to be here. So Hawaii and maybe senior human factors engineer, remote, working from my private house somewhere.
sounds awesome, man. And Kelsey, it sounds like you might want to go into academia, but would you think you're going to be in 5 years about finishing up?
Yeah, hopefully I am not here as a 6th-year PhD and defend before then. Maybe a postdoc. I think that's the next logical step. So just continuing in research training and hopefully getting more teaching experience. Unless academia tires me out, in which case I will be joining Alex on a nice private beach somewhere with my PhD salary.
They make more than us in industry. So at that rate, I mean, you can buy it and I'll just pay you rent.
Nice. Okay. Other questions from anyone here or online? I think Aaron, Kyle, do you have anything you want to add? Maybe a little bit about your path. So for those of you guys who don't know, Aaron's a professor here at Columbia. So.
No, at least the folks that are at Columbia hear me babble way too much, especially Kelsey, Alex, and Kelsey. But what I actually have a question for all of you folks here. So I sincerely don't believe in changing anything from the past. I think everything happens the way it does for a reason. You might lose something great if you change things. But instead, I just wonder if you were ever concerned or not confident about making this decision, what would you have told yourself to maybe help push your way through and kind of keep going along this path, which even though for us it feels rather common because we're in academia, for the general populace, you get a degree from a place like Columbia, then you're ready to go off with your life. So what would you have told yourself to get that extra bit of motivation to go down this pathway?
So why don't we go from Kelsey first, at least you're on my top of the screen here.
I think I would tell myself exactly what Professor Kyle and Dr. Nurikar told me, which is you might as well go ahead and get a PhD. I think I was pretty insecure about my qualifications. I thought, well, I don't have any papers out. I haven't been doing research in the field I want to do. Maybe my GPA isn't super great, so I wasn't very confident in my competitiveness as an applicant. But I think they kind of just reassured me that it really doesn't matter as long as you're passionate about that and if that comes through in your applications. So my original plan was to maybe take a gap year and try to boost myself, but they really encouraged me to just go for it and let your the schools you're applying to make that decision for you instead of dismissing yourself right off. So
should we go, Amara? Any thoughts?
Sure. Honestly, this is really good for me too, because I'm going to be applying for next cycle. So this is all really good advice. But I definitely want to go the PhD route because I joined this program, and I think, okay, so the question was what we would tell ourselves when we feel doubts about going this route. Okay. Yeah, I definitely felt that too. It's a hard route to go. And so of course the insecurity comes in. Are you qualified enough? I think definitely just exploring the science and what you're interested in. I love that Ketsia said she just really went with what she enjoyed, because that inspires me and gives me hope. Yeah, I think if you just really like learning and you want to also maybe give back or collaborate with students down the road too, this is like a perfect place to go. So yeah, just kind of follow that, and yeah, believe in yourself.
Kelsey, how would you go? And then we'll have Alex go.
Yeah, I guess if I had any doubts about what I was doing, I would remind myself the why, or why I'm pursuing this. And I would also keep in mind that, you know, when you get a PhD, you have access to opportunities that allow you to put other people on. And you know, there's not many people who look like me who are in these positions, who are sensitive to issues that my community or other unrepresented communities might go through. And you know, it's bigger than you, and this could be something that you could really help change somebody's life with. Like, you could be that professor that changes another person's life, or be the first professor who looks like you and, you know, tells you what it's like being in these positions and how to navigate these spaces, and really help somebody as they become their own, go into their own role. So yeah.
Okay, Alex.
So I would tell myself a couple of things. The first one being that you are equally intelligent, if not in some cases more intelligent than like your white counterparts in similar roles in these spaces. Just because when I was at Columbia, as Dr. Kyle knows, I did struggle with imposter syndrome very heavily, especially with regards to being a Black man in STEM. And I often felt as if like even my opinion wasn't as valuable as somebody who was white in a similar role as me. And now that I'm like in the space and I'm like here and I'm confident and I'm like, let's bring all the Black people up with me. And, you know, I'm like seeing that like my voice is heard and my voice is respected, and I'm like commanding not the room, because like we're still doing virtual stuff, but I command the Google Meets calls. So I would just go back and tell myself that like you are more than capable of doing it, and you can be, like Kelsey said, like Ketsia said, like you can be that face that looks like you in these spaces where there typically aren't many that do. And the second thing I would tell myself is that there's plenty of funding out there for master's programs if you're interested. I put it off for a while because I thought that it was just going to be all student loans, and a good amount still was, but there are a lot of really good opportunities out there. Like what was mentioned earlier, the GEM fellowship, I wanted to mention really quickly just because I applied for the fellowship. I didn't match with the schools that I chose, but I got an offer from Syracuse for their master's program in bioengineering, full tuition with a stipend and like books and everything paid for as a GEM fellow, just because I applied through the scholarship opportunity, and because I didn't apply to Syracuse at all, but like the director reached out to me and was like, we'll pay for you anyway. And I was like, no. And my bank was like, why? But even if you don't do like a fellowship or anything like that, a lot of these universities will still have funding set aside for I mean, I don't want to put it this way, but like students of color coming into their programs because they're trying to increase our presence on these campuses as well. So when I went to Duke for my master's program, and I worked with the university, and I got half tuition plus a research stipend as my financial aid package, which is like pretty great when you consider that most master's programs, like you pay everything out of pocket. So definitely like reach out and like talk to these schools, like if you're applying for a master's degree, and see like what are the financial aid options. Like I know your website says you don't offer it, but like, do you though? And a lot of the times they do. So would go back and tell myself that as well. Like, don't let money be the thing that stops you from going to get this degree.
Great. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. So I think our hour is almost up. I'd like to get my thank you slide and my Connect with Columbia BME slide up there, but I think I probably can't do that. So I'm not going to try. So with that in mind, I just wanted to thank people who helped out with this. Alexis Newman, who helped set this webinar up. Helen Chen, who is always there to help set up all the food and the logistics for things. Jose, as well as Lisa for speaking tonight. Lance for here handling the chat, and of course for our alum speakers. It's really great to see you guys. Amara, I had to meet you in person at some point. For Professor Kyle to be visiting us from North Carolina tonight as well. And so again, hopefully we feel like this will be the first of multiple workshops where we can sort of dissect out the whole application process, but focus on individual parts of the process to try to make you guys very competitive and strong. And I think the key thing what Elisa was mentioning is really research is the best way to sort of get your feet wet into understanding what the process is, and what Kelsey mentioned, even it's just important to know what you love and what you don't like to make your decisions along the way. So I think with that in mind, again, thank you for joining us. If you're not here in person, for those of you guys who are here in person, thanks for coming out in the rain, and feel free to bring home pizza and drinks for yourself. So we're going to sign off then. Hopefully I can handle that okay, and take care and enjoy it, and be on the lookout for the next workshop. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Great seeing you guys.
Thank you.
Safe
Have a good
trip-
night,
Safe
everyone.
trip, man. Take care, you
And
guys. Good
then
to see
the
you.
question, Kelsey, that you posed about passing on the info to the attendees, maybe we can just email everybody with your contact info if you want.
Okay, that's great. So how do we?
So why don't we do that? We can download the attendee list and we can email.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Contact information would be outstanding.
Yeah.
So-
So I guess give it to me, Clark, and I'll send it around.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
thanks, guys. Okay, so Alexis, you'll kill the
Yep.
webinar, because I don't think I can from here.
Oh, you're the host.
Thanks
You're
so
the
much.
host.
Exactly. It's like I can't get over to you at the screen. Are you kidding?
Clark, you have to do it. You're the host. I can't.
Okay. How do we get to that screen?
There should be a red end button.
Yeah. Oh, you're there. Oh, good. Okay. And